are live for day two of our live coverage and leading up to what will probably be the winter weather event of the year, at least from a number of people impacted standpoint. And so, welcome in, and how are you doing this morning?
Not too bad. Ready to get this thing going. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Just yeah, we have some preparations down here. I'm in the Houston area. Obviously, you're about as far away from the storm. Actually, no, your home is as far away from the storm as possible. You're in the thick of the cold air mass. It's going to be supplying the uh, the wintry feel to this event here the next couple of days, huh?
Yeah, we had wind chills minus 35 here in the Chicago suburbs this morning. So a lot of Arctic air being injected into the north side of the storm. And actually, Chicago might get grazed with a couple inches of fluffy snow here on Sunday morning, but definitely not the focus for this storm. We're looking south of us through the Ohio Valley and southern plains, and really almost the whole eastern third of the country.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's a cold storm. It's cold at the low levels. That's what's going to lead to the massive ice storm on the southern fringe of this winter weather event. And one of the biggest issues, like we mentioned, is going to be just the wide expanse of the impacts. And so, what we're looking at here is just a map from the National Weather Service. Watches and warnings across the country. Anywhere in pink, you are currently under a winter storm warning. Anywhere in these kind of darker blues on the southern fringe, we're looking at winter storm watches. And then we have ice storm warnings, from northeast Louisiana through the northwestern quadrant or northwestern third of Mississippi, extending east through Alabama. And then we have another section of ice storm warnings right where the cold air damming is going to be at its strongest, through Charlotte, Greenville, the Atlanta area. So, pretty impressive, expansive look to this. Christian, what are your takeaways from here? And then we'll probably move into some model guidance after touching on some of the watches and warnings across the country.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing here is just the expansiveness of the storm, and also really pointing out that while the southeast and the east coast are always get a lot of attention for these winter storms, this is really the Ohio Valley as well, the Southern Plains. So, some areas that haven't been called out as much, but much of the state of Oklahoma, Arkansas, southern and central Missouri, including the St. Louis metro, the Indianapolis metro, southern Illinois, most of Ohio. I mean, all of you through that stretch are looking at significant snow accumulations and in some cases ice. So we'll dig in a little bit more into that. But this is not just an East Coast storm. This is really a massive number of people that are going to be affected, and also not just the snow and the ice, but the cold behind it is going to be brutal for everybody.
Yeah, it'll be. I think in looking at this image real quick. I mean, just the idea that what you don't get a lot is you know Central Texas into Oklahoma. Kind of right up the 45 corridor from Houston to Dallas to Oklahoma City. Usually, when you get a storm there, you're not also getting a storm in the 95 corridor. And I think that's what's pretty incredible about this system is, we think there's been some parallels drawn to the cold outbreak of February 2021, which was very severe. In Texas, it was a $1 billion event down in the Southern Plains. But you really had kind of a pretty warm southeast ridge that kind of flexed its muscles, that really had a line of demarcation. I remember being in central Pennsylvania, and I had a lot of rain. Actually, there was a lot of warm air on the East Coast, and all the cold air was really boxed in to the central portions of the U.S. This is way different. We have a little bit more of a west to east orientation of what's going on here, which naturally will impact a lot more people. So, that is what is pretty incredible about this event here. And with that, I think we'll move on. Check out some model guidance, get some pretty pictures here going. Christian, you have a preference on model to start with this morning, and then we can kind of jump around from there. European, GFS, which one do you have feel is a better handle?
Yeah, maybe we start out first with the global models. So we'll start with the euro, and maybe we show some high res models today as well.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do, similar to what we did yesterday, and really kind of move from west to east, and just really kind of on the timeline of the system. And so even this morning, I'm in the region of where the precipitation will kind of originate. So I can tell everybody once it starts raining here in Houston that rain is coming up north to kind of spread into the colder air. So we are already starting to see some drizzle out here. A pretty impressive for such a weak system, honestly, when it comes to the deepness of pressure. We have a pretty good steady flow of moisture off the Gulf, and precipitation will break out across Texas and Oklahoma through the day today and into tomorrow morning. And so what we're going to see is just kind of this start as rain for much of the state of Texas, but as you get closer to the Red River Valley, there will be more in the way of freezing rain, snow, and sleet, especially as you get north of the Red River into Oklahoma. And so, as we move this forward into early tomorrow morning, we are really just caked in freezing rain here. Surface temperatures dipping below 32, all the way down into the I-35 corridor, I-20 corridors here in Texas. And then, I mean, this is what what we talked about yesterday, most particularly concerned about in a very populated area, which is DFW, getting the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, really getting hit hard with a long duration freezing rain event. And so as we progress forward here through the day Saturday, the cold air will continue to sink down through the state, and this will spread the freezing rain threat farther south. One thing that we noted yesterday, Christian, and you can maybe touch on this a little bit more, is potentially sort of the two-part system or the two-part sequence to this storm, where you have the first outbreak of kind of overrunning precip, maybe a potential lull, and then the secondary and potentially heavier batch of precip that will come through late Saturday into Sunday.
Yeah, you do kind of see two parts, and some of the high res models are really picking this out well too. But like Garrett said, you could get the first round. You can kind of late today into early Saturday, and then as the low kind of pushes through, you get a little bit of dry slotting, so a little bit of a break, which I will point out for freezing rain is actually not good, because you can still get very light freezing rain and mist in these breaks. And freezing rain does tend to accumulate faster with lighter precipitation, and temperatures are cold enough.
Yeah, and so I mean, what is interesting to me though is, I mean, and let's look at let's take a look at go to some of the higher res guidance here. Is this, the NAM is actually doing a pretty good job of showing this sort of break, if you will. And so you'll have areas that break out as snow and sleet later this afternoon and this evening, and then you can see this kind of just pretty you know pretty staunch dry slot, if you will. I wouldn't necessarily call it a dry slot. I think there's just two different forces of forcing mechanisms coming through. So we might actually see a period of time in central Oklahoma where they're expecting upwards of a foot of snow, where you get, an early 2 to 4 and then you stop. And some people may say, like, is this going to be the storm? No, this is not going to be the storm, because then you come through with a heavier batch on the back end. And so as we move maybe into some metro areas here and kind of break down some totals, you'll get this back to the European. The biggest concern, like we mentioned, is the freezing rain amounts. And so the European model, very aggressive in the first stanza of this system in North Texas, upwards of over a half inch of freezing rain, and then totaling out by the time we're through the day on Sunday, going closer to an inch total falling. There has been a bit of an uptrend in the sleet department from the European for some of these areas. It's interesting. Some of the models are really, really heavy on sleet. Some of them, with the algorithm, how they work the frozen precipitation, are heavier on freezing rain. The European has trended a little bit more towards there being some sleet through southern Oklahoma. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up breaking down. But if we move this into real quick into the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex here, not a ton of sleet here, but obviously the entire viewing area for this region caked in freezing rain. Let's look at the GFS totals for it. A little farther south, but that is because the GFS is showing a lot more sleet. This is actually at 12Z. Let's back this up to 6Z, the last full run. These seem overdone to me, Christian. I mean, the idea that we're going to have, 3 to 4 inches of sleet in an area, it seems pretty far fetched to me.
Yeah, if you look at some of the temperature profile forecasts in both the high res models and the globals, the more likely scenario is that you transition over from snow, have a 1 to 3 hour period of sleet, which tends to be a transitional precipitite, and then you actually go over to freezing rain, which is a little bit worse for everybody involved. Is this is probably going to be actual ice accumulation on trees, on power lines, on objects. So some of these freezing rain projections, for example, from the GFS, are probably pretty close to what you can expect across this area. Sometimes models do tend to overdo freezing rain a little, but because they are overcounting sleet, I believe in this case, this is probably pretty close. You're talking about a quarter to half inch of ice and locally more across a significant part of North Texas, which again, like we talked about yesterday, does not have the infrastructure to support that.
Yeah, and then you get that ice, and then like we talked about a little bit yesterday, you're not going to have it melt quickly. That is the big concern. And so as we move to just looking at surface temperatures post this storm, we talked about the idea that you're going to have freezing rain falling in the upper teens and low 20s, which is a concern. And then we move this forward. We get through the day. Sunday, highs really only topping out in the mid to up, the low to mid 20s, and then lows Monday night into Monday morning. Single digits. I have to imagine that there are going to be, areas that are below freezing if there are phone ringing. If there is any ice, sleet, snow on the ground, you're going to get below zero in some of these areas in North Texas, and being below freezing for an extended period of time, which is not something that this infrastructure is prepared to handle. So let's move on a little bit farther east here. Going to back out to the European model here. Take a look at the precipitation types, and let's move on to the southeast, Christian, and maybe you can kind of set the stage for what to expect. I guess real quick, we can talk about snow totals through Oklahoma, just for anybody who's before we fully move on to the southeast. Generally, I think a 12 to 18 inch snowstorm, at the peak of it through central Oklahoma. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, there's going to be a swath in there from the northern Texas Panhandle, probably over to the southwestern part of Missouri, where you're looking at a foot or more locally higher in some of the heavier bands. Also calling out Arkansas too, that we didn't talk a whole lot about yesterday. Northwestern Arkansas, you're in this. There's going to be a pretty significant 12-inch plus swath of locally a foot and a half or more. And that kind of stretches all the way over in Indiana and Ohio as well, which we'll talk about here shortly. But this is a really large swath of a foot plus totals, as you can see on the map here, really all the way over into the northeast.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Christian, we're gonna take 2 seconds here, and try to figure out your mic. Not sure. Everybody getting multiple. We got people watching, which is great. But we got to find a way to get you turned up here because honestly, your voice is very important in this. So we're gonna take 2 minutes here, and see if we can get you a little bit louder. In the meantime, just give us a minute and we'll figure this out. I mean, and you've said that you've done your um, your mic audio, correct, Christian? You've
Yeah, I
turned it up as much.
switched my mic over and jacked it up to max. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm maxed on my end, trying to turn it up. Um, yeah, and I'm not seeing anywhere that is capturing your. Maybe you're just gonna have to scream. Maybe that's what it's gonna have to be.
Yeah, I can talk louder.
I mean, maybe there's a chance that the audio is running through just my Mac, and so maybe just maybe do a test 1 2 3, say a couple sentences, and we can get Madison to confirm whether we're turned up or not.
Yep. Testing 1 2 3. Testing.
That might be better. I think the source of your audio has been my computer. Can you try unmuting the screen capture? I don't. Yeah, that might end up leading to my. Yeah. Is there an echo on my end here, Madison? I don't hear an echo, but Christian, you probably might need to talk.
Testing again. One, two, three. Testing. No echo for you, Garrett, that I can hear. I have everything maxed out here on my end, input and output
That
volume.
that might have fixed it. We have a our producer has said it's good.
Okay.
Anybody
Okay.
else who is providing feedback
There we go.
through the chat and other places, if you can hear us, I think we're good to go. So I think
All right.
yeah, much better. You sound perfect now. We'll give a little shout out. We have a dedicated follower. I think a few in Central Tennessee. We're going to break down what's going on there here in a second as we move it to the southeast. But says you sound perfect, which I know is high praise from him. So I think we're ready to roll here.
All
Dave
right.
Downey, our media face of Flash. If you're listening to this or watching this, please come back so we don't have to manage the the OBS system anymore. We're just good to talk about the weather. We're not good at this media stuff. So at least for me. So okay, let's get this back rolling here. And just lock in on what we're about to deal with here. So, going through the timeline, already talked about the western portions that are going to be impacted of our areas: Oklahoma, Texas, South Central Plains. Moving this into the southeast, looks like we start getting precipitation to break out through Arkansas, northern Louisiana. Very, very early Saturday morning into Missouri, early Saturday morning. And by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, you can really cut the state of Tennessee in half. The northern half will start as snow. The southern half will probably briefly start as snow before turning over to freezing rain and sleet. But just comment a little bit on the expanse of this freezing rain corridor. Right up through Texarkana to Little Rock to Memphis, southern Arkansas, northern Louisiana, Mississippi seem to be a pretty nasty area late Saturday into Sunday.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot yesterday, but really concerned about northern Mississippi. We had called out Oxford, Garrett, but yeah, Shreveport, northern Louisiana, southern Arkansas. This is going to be potentially the most significant of the freezing rain in this whole storm. Will be through this area. And two things I want to point out about this area is one, it's going to be really cold behind the storm. So you're talking about teens and single digits. The other thing that we're going to kind of drill in on here soon too is the wind and the rain that wraps in on the back end of the storm as that kind of secondary low pressure kicks through with the mid-level energy. So you're looking at not only freezing rain kind of accumulating to all of your outdoor surfaces, your power lines, your trees, but then on the back end of this storm, Sunday afternoon, you get this big kick of wind. So it's not just your impacts during the event. Obviously, travel will be not recommended across any of these areas. But then behind it, Sunday night into Monday, you're worried about wind kind of exacerbating the potential for power outages. And with the really cold weather, we're advising municipalities across this area to be prepared for shelters open and the potential for extended power outages. I mean, this is it's a multi-phase system. It's easy to get excited about the snow, but it's really the ice and the wind and cold behind it that will make this storm dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, just taking a look at what we have here in Tennessee. Even if you change to rain, before you change to rain here, maybe southern Tennessee up into Nashville briefly and to Chattanooga. And again, I tend to think the European is still too warm through this region. This seems a little bit more realistic to me from the GFS. So we'll see how that trends throughout the day. But even take this solution. You go to total freezing rain amounts that have fallen, through the day on Sunday, and you're still talking half-inch amounts. Even if it gets to 34 degrees, that doesn't just melt. It's not like it's 70 degrees and it's going to melt quickly. 34 degrees, it's not going to melt very quickly. And so you see a half-inch of ice on these trees, power lines, and then, I mean, take a look at the wind gusts through central Tennessee, Mississippi. This is a big concern. I mean, to see 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts, potentially with some convection coming through. I mean, this is a pretty serious situation when it comes to the potential for power outages, down trees, roof damage. You're not going to get that where snow is falling, right? But where you are going to get it is where you're going to get a half inch to an inch of ice, and then, like you said this morning, I mean, and it's really a great call. Observing the idea that we're going to see wind gusts, like you said, with potentially a squall line, an ice squall line, I guess, in some areas, a pretty significant setup in these areas.
Yeah, yeah, you got areas in northwestern Alabama, southern Tennessee, northern Mississippi, that are going to probably start the day with some sleet, some freezing rain, transition to rain, and then maybe hear thunder before the day's over, with gusty winds. So even Huntsville, where we talked about yesterday, you probably on the front end of this, because of how cold and dry it is, you probably do start with some sleet and then a little bit of freezing rain. Maybe not as bad as to your west and north. You still are going to have that impact in the morning on Sunday, and then have to worry about the winds coming through. So obviously, we've talked about Nashville, big impacts, further north, really all through Kentucky and Ohio. This is a big deal, but Huntsville, you're really not out of the woods on this. Even Birmingham, where we do think that this is pretty much a cold rain event for you. You do still have to worry about the winds and potential thunderstorms on Sunday. So even the warm side of this storm has some risk, and then kind of looking over into North Georgia, which I know we're about to hop to. I'm really concerned about Northeast Georgia, because that's another hot spot for ice, where we're expecting some significant icing that could be followed by the same type of gusty winds. So the Southeast, this is a multi-hazard event, whereas in Pennsylvania, for example, or Ohio, we're expecting all snow for you. And while 12 to 18 inches of snow or more is a lot, it's a big storm. That is, far preferable to getting a half an inch of ice followed by 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So as far as the dangerous part of this storm, we're really honing in on the southeast, where there's all these multiple risks that are going to kind of compound.
Yeah, and then on the back end, obviously, we get through the day on Sunday, and then it may feel cold. The bottom drops out as we get into Sunday night, into Monday morning. Any Like we said, any areas that have any sort of frozen precipitation on the ground, enough to scour really, or lead to some dynamic cooling, and radiational cooling, you're gonna get below zero. I feel like you could get below zero in Northwest Tennessee, Kentucky, right through the Ohio River Valley as well. But what also is going to stand out is these areas from an agronomic perspective: Mississippi, northern Alabama, Georgia, central Tennessee. Snow cover actually is your best friend in a very cold weather event. It acts as a blanket, for any grass or anything that you're trying to protect. The worst trend that we've seen from an agronomic perspective in the last 3 days has been the snow to move into areas that you have cold season grasses in the Ohio Valley, so it can handle this kind of cold outbreak. Where you have a lot of Bermuda grasses, warm season grasses, in the transition zone here, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, and having no snow cover with this type of cold, this is a problem. So just making sure that all precautions are being taken, double covering. The wind is going to howl from the northwest, as we get this kind of cold, back end cold front, if you will, the Arctic boundary to sink through. We are going to have winds 25, 35 miles per hour out of the northwest. So just making sure you're prepared for a snowless ground, with a wet ground, and then very cold air on the backside. So that for sure is a concern that we have. And so, in addition here, I mean, we have the new GFS coming in, so we probably should ride this 12Z data here, and we can see, honestly. Let's take a quick look and see what the trend was versus 6Z. See if there's anything. We're always getting new data in, and so for me, there's a big. Oh, let's see if we can get this moved here. There we go. Let's see if we can, kind of do a side by side. Go out to, let's say, 21Z Saturday on the 12Z GFS, and we'll go to 21Z Saturday on the 6Z GFS. This would be Saturday afternoon. See if we notice any trends different. Not much between the two. Let me get this around here.
Yeah,
Not too much
it's
here.
great. GFS has that great run to run consistency. And,
Hmm.
we talked about it yesterday, Garrett. Generally, the European model is preferred across our field. Obviously, a lot of exceptions and nuance to that, but the GFS has shown some really good consistency on this storm. And at least we've talked about kind of on the northern flank, feeling like it's handling the track better, given where the southeast ridge is flexing, given where the surface high is. Both the Euro and GFS are similar, but there are some distinct differences that are critical, especially on the East Coast.
Hmm.
Another thing, talking about all these impacts is, from North Texas all the way over to North Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, the whole Southeast. What do you do to prepare, right? Like what do people need to be doing at this juncture where we're about 24 hours out? In this type of setup, we never hype. We always say the best thing to do is prepare, not to panic. If you do have a backup generator, making sure that that's ready to go would definitely be prudent. From a grocery perspective, definitely going to the store and making sure you have a week of essentials. Prudent for sure. And just remember, warm clothes too. If you're gonna in an area expecting snow, if you're planning on plowing, pushing snow, making sure that you have a lot of layers, base layers, and all that stuff ready in case the power goes out as well. This is the type of storm that you do want to have those precautions ready for, because we do unfortunately expect there will be power outages across a pretty wide area, particularly if you are expecting freezing rain, and particularly if you're expecting both snow and freezing rain, which is a scenario for a lot of Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, up into Maryland. There's a lot of areas that'll get a pretty significant snow followed by freezing rain, which is honestly the worst case scenario in a
Hmm.
winter weather setup.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I mean, and just the idea that there's not really a reprieve of the cold air post storm, right? And you're not going to warm up to the 40s and the 50s if you're in these areas that are without power. You're actually going to get
Yeah.
colder. So just being prepared from that perspective as well. I being in the South now and having events where it was very warm. After we had Hurricane Beryl a couple years ago in Houston, and we were out of power for a week. Um, Not enjoyable for it to be warm and be sweating while you're sleeping because there's no air conditioning, but would much rather have that than it be 15 degrees. That's a little bit more life threatening. So just making sure that you were prepared here. Christian, let's touch on the Midwest here, and then I think we can kind of work up the 75 or 85 and 95 corridors, if you will. Go
Yep.
Atlanta through Raleigh, and then up the northern Mid Atlantic and Northeast. So just taking a look, again, no major changes this morning. Christian mentioned a lot of run to run consistency from some of these models, and so taking a look, or written mostly the GFS. Let's touch on southern half of Missouri, most of Missouri, southern half of Illinois, Indiana, and into Ohio. The one thing there we have noticed, and just the timing again of snow overspreading the region Saturday afternoon, increasing in intensity Sunday, and then departing these areas early Monday morning. The one thing I have noticed has just been a little bit more from run to run of a southwesterly to northeasterly orientate, or southwest to northeast orientation of the shield of precipitation. It's less of a west to east sharp cutoff where if St. Louis is getting snow and Chicago isn't, well then Cleveland's definitely not getting snow. Well, that's not the case here. We are gaining some latitude as the storm moves a little bit eastward. So even if you're seeing off to your west in Iowa and northern Missouri, not much of the precipitation getting that way. The confluent zone, what kind of the line of demarcation shifts farther north as you get farther east. So there's definitely been a little bit more of a gaining of latitude the last couple of days as you get through the Midwest, which is given the opportunity to get 6 to 12 inches into Indianapolis, a foot plus into Columbus, near a foot in Cleveland, and then obviously farther east, those areas are really going some different dynamics with cold air damming, but there's going to be a lot of snow out east, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But any points about the Midwest that you want to hit before we move on to the far east?
Yeah, just pointing out a couple. Cincinnati, you're, you're kind of in the crush zone for this. There's a pretty good model consensus for at least a foot, but there are some locally 18-inch plus. You see the GFS has been aggressive for you, but Cincinnati is a pretty safe 12 to 18. That's one area we called out. Indianapolis, Garrett, we had talked about. Not quite as heavy or a little bit further north for Indianapolis, but this is still a big impact for you in Indy. Probably somewhere around 10 inches. You see the GFS is a little higher than that. But this is a pretty big storm all the way up into Columbus as well. So really the whole state of Ohio. If you live anywhere in Ohio, this is a 10-inch plus storm for you unless you're in the far northwestern part of the state, far northern and northwestern. Pennsylvania, same deal. Unless you're in the far northwest portion, this is probably a 12-inch plus storm for you. So the Midwest, Ohio Valley and Midwest, not to be left out here. Fortunately, this is predominantly snow or all snow for the vast majority of the areas we just talked about: Ohio, northern Kentucky, parts of central and southern Indiana, and southern Illinois. But it is a significant amount.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, something that these areas can handle, which is why we're not spending as much time, obviously impactful, maybe some school closures Monday. I would think by Tuesday, all of these areas have the infrastructure to kind of clear that snow out. I think honestly, more of a concern to life and to property and to infrastructure is going to be the cold air coming in behind it. But again, a foot of snow on the ground will help some of these areas insulate where you're not going to have much insulation. And you're in Chicago, so you could probably tell me if there's already snow on the ground. But if you're in Iowa and Wisconsin, these areas where temperatures are going to continue to be, 20, 30 below normal, it seems to me like the Midwest has more to be concerned about with the cold air than impacts from the snowfall. It'll be disruptive while the storm falls or the snow falls, but this isn't anything those areas can't handle, I don't think.
Yeah, no, that's right, Garrett. And one correction, I got a little excited and I said Indianapolis instead of Columbus. Indianapolis, you're 6 to 9. Columbus, you're 10 plus. Just to clarify what I just said. Cincy, you're 12 plus. One thing Garrett just mentioned, Chicago. If you're in the Chicago area, particularly south of Chicago, don't completely discount this storm, especially if you have plans on Sunday, because it is really, really cold. And even 2 or 3 inches of snow will cause travel issues. So, Illinois as a whole, obviously Southern Illinois, this is a significant snow event, like we just mentioned, but really the whole state of Illinois does need to be paying attention to this because it is really cold on the north side of this storm, and travel impacts can be significant on the major interstates, I-80 particularly, even with small amounts of snow.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And stick with us here. We're touching on this storm, and then we're gonna follow up. Really mention what we're looking at cold wise next week, because that is impactful, and I think can impact a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of plans people are making from a business standpoint, and obviously, a personal safe and health risk standpoint, safety and health risk standpoint. But then we're going to touch on what could be a possible threat next week, or later next week. So we're going to run through this storm. This is obviously the focal point, but if you have questions about how cold is it going to get next week, the longevity of it, we're gonna circle back to that. We just want to get through kind of the most important storyline, which is obviously this major winter storm. So same sort of process here. Let's talk about Atlanta through the Carolinas into Virginia. Like we said, starting late Saturday, early Sunday, freezing rain starts to break out. What people tend to not get is, like, if I'm in Georgia, right? It's like, oh well, if I'm starting as rain, I'm going to stay as rain. No, not going to be the case. Why is that the case, Christian, through central and eastern Georgia, coming up late Saturday and early Sunday?
Yeah, what you see sometimes in this area with the wedge or an otherwise cold air damming, where cold air gets trapped east of the Appalachians, is it reinforces itself. So in other words, when it's really dry and cold and you precipitate or you rain into a dry air mass, you actually cool the temperatures off. The temperature comes toward the dew point. So areas like the Atlanta metro, for example, even down to I-20, That's kind of where the wedge in this situation I think will reach, right about I-20. You can start as rain and it's liquid, and the ground is totally wet. And then as the event goes on, you cool off and it transitions to a freezing rain. So while northeast Georgia, say from Athens to the north and east, this is a significant ice storm for you no matter what. I do want to point out the Atlanta metro, late Saturday into Sunday. You are far from out of the woods. This is still I believe, a likely winter storm event for you as far as ice. I think inside the city, if you're in Atlanta proper and to the south and west, this is probably a little more borderline for you. The temperatures are going to be hovering right around that freezing mark. But I feel pretty confident saying that Atlanta to the north and east, you are going to see freezing rain. You do have to worry about hazardous travel. I think if you're south and southwest of Atlanta, you might see a little bit of wintry mix. You might see a brief period of freezing rain, especially Saturday night. But you're probably just kind of outside of that significant impact zone. So any plans, anyone in Georgia, South Carolina with plans to travel, say up I-85 north, I would recommend reevaluating those plans for Saturday night or Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean we can see some of these amounts, and again, even just cut them in half. You're getting an inch of freezing rain, and what one thing that has been very consistent in the modeling is this area from Lake Oconee to Euro Old Stomping Grounds in Athens, northeast into Greenville, Spartan, Greenville, Greenberg, Spartanville. Am I correct there?
Spartanburg, yeah, Greenville,
Spartanburg, yeah,
Spartanburg.
yeah. There we go. Have got it mixed up a little bit. Right into that corridor into Charlotte. Feels a lot like how it's going to be in Northwest Mississippi too. Just a lot of freezing rain, the potential for utility issues down power lines and trees, and extending northward into the triangle of central North Carolina as well. From a sleet perspective, a little bit farther north, seems like there's a lot of mixed, not mixed messaging of the modeling, but this is where things get a little bit more intricate. Is it going to be freezing rain? Is it going to be sleet? It seems to me like there's going to be enough of a wedge, enough of a solid pack of low level cold air that there will be somewhere in this region that actually does see these 2 to 4 inch sleet numbers. In my opinion, I think this is more likely here than what you see in Northeast Texas. With the model outputting this, there will be a very, very large wedge of cold air dug into to southern Virginia, northern North Carolina, and so I think these sleet numbers are a little bit more realistic in these areas. Let's take a look at just kind of how the precipitation transitions over time and the timing of it. We start as snow through the entire state of Virginia late Saturday. We're going to be sleet, maybe snow at the northern portions of North Carolina late Saturday, early Sunday, and then as we get that warm nose overrunning the shallow cold air that's dammed up underneath at the surface, we will start to see the transition to sleet and freezing rain. We'll start as freezing rain in Georgia and South Carolina, obviously, and then as we move through the day Sunday, much of Kentucky, West Virginia, Northern Virginia, I'm going to move out to the Mid-Atlantic here as we move north, will be starting as snow, and we'll really at least get a good 12-hour shot of snow that will get their totals up to 6 inches. From that point on, Christian, is when we start to see, will these areas start to exceed 6 inches because they stay snow, or will the sleet start to pound things down a little bit, especially, obviously north of Richmond, going southwest of DC in the Nova region into Baltimore and Philadelphia. And so all these areas will start as snow as we get through the day Sunday. Very heavy amounts of precipitation here. If we go to, what are the hourly snowfall totals, or 3 hour snowfall rate, you're looking at areas that are pushing an inch an hour, if not more, especially with ratios. But we start to get a transition here where we have no snow falling because it starts turning over to sleet. And so, as we move north here, Christian, talk a little bit about, what we're expecting in the DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia area. And then I think we can maybe touch on what we're going to see from, Trenton to New York, through into southern New England and Boston.
Yeah, just being from Maryland and forecasting numerous winter storms there, you're always a little gun shy about mixing, right? So I think some of particularly if you live along and east of I-95 in the major I-95 cities, I have seen some snow forecasts of 12 to 18 inches there. To be honest with you, that's probably a little aggressive. Those of you who live there know that when you get coastal storms and you get mixing with sleet, it does tend to keep snow totals down a little bit. Particularly because we have seen the models nudge this low as it redevelops a little closer to the coast. So I would be more comfortable saying if you are, if you are in the DC metro area, the Baltimore metro area, the Philly metro area, even up to New York City, although I do think New York City gets a little more snow, and to the east of those locations. So if you live east of I-95, 6 to 12 is a little more safe for you. I think there's some areas once you get out to the Maryland Eastern Shore that are getting less than that. This is probably just a few inches for you along the bay because you are going to change over to sleet sooner. So like Garrett, this is a good example here is this snow map. I believe that this is perfect for areas of northwestern Maryland, northern Virginia, eastern West Virginia, southern and central Pennsylvania, really all through Pennsylvania. These snow numbers you're seeing here might actually be a little low because you're going to have some higher snow ratios on the north side of the storm. So 12 to 18 inches or more locally across everywhere I just mentioned, I think is a pretty good call. Once you get closer to I-95, though, Baltimore and DC, 6 to 12 is probably a better starting point for the forecast. And then once you get a little further east to the eastern shore, Maryland, Delaware, 4 to 8 is probably a better call. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of you end up getting more like 3 inches of snow and then a lot of sleet. So that's one thing I want to mention with this storm is Garrett alluded to this, but a lot of the snow forecasts are showing this west to east orientation of a foot or more of snow. And that with this type of low track where it's going a little more to the north, a little more poleward, that just generally doesn't happen. So I think the map Garrett's showing here, the European snow forecast, that gradient that you see kind of southwest and northeast right near the I-95 corridor and the fall line, this is probably a pretty good representation of kind of where you're going to see the cutoff of the heavier amounts to where sleet kind of holds totals down a little bit as far as snow.
Yeah, and I think the Europeans actually doing a good job in now where this gradient from 8 to 15 sets up, exactly, is always the question, right? And always the battle, and it always seems to be like this battle line is drawn in the 95 corridor. I mean, it just is it's straddling it. And so, the question is this 50 miles farther south, 50 miles farther northwest? I'm in a group chat with my dad, who's a forecaster, has been for a long time, and then some other kind of weather weenies, if you will, that are right in this kind of like Colts Neck, New York City, Central Jersey area, and like living and dying with every model run. They're snow guys, right? And so living and dying with every model run because you go to Northwest Jersey and you're looking at 16 to 20. You start mixing, that really cuts it down pretty quickly. And so you're talking a factor of doubling your snowfall totals from Philly to just north of Allentown, with where sleet can mix in. And so, like you mentioned, I mean, anytime you're getting, and let's go to the upper air temperatures here. Anytime you're getting this warm nose kind of nudge its way into southeast PA because you're getting the surface low about 50 to 100 miles off Atlantic City. We've seen this hundreds of times. I mean, maybe not hundreds of times. Maybe it is hundreds of times in our lifetime. But this setup does show, those areas that are locked into the cold air damming, central, southern Pennsylvania, talking Garrett County, Maryland, central Maryland, northern Virginia, just northwest of the I-95 corridor. This is a classic setup for 8 to 16, and I think, like you mentioned, Christian, this to me looks like a 95 corridor on south, at least south of New York City, is probably more of a 6 to 10 setup, and then mixing as some sleet. Honestly, the precip probably starts to change over as you start to get some dry air coming in, and the precip really will shut off for some of these areas as you get a kind of a transfer of energy offshore. And so what will end up happening is we go to the total precipitation numbers, or actually let's go to the simulated radar maybe, and what will happen here is you'll actually get the precip shield kind of flying up into New York and into New England, northern New England, and you'll just probably end as sleet and freezing rain. That's a little bit more start and stop, if that makes sense, versus it being part of the main precipitation shield. And so as we do move farther north here, Christian, Let's talk a little bit about Long Island into New York City. I mean, most populated parts of the country we haven't even gotten to yet because of the
Yeah.
expanse of the storm. But thoughts on what you're going to see in New England? It seems like a pretty. I don't know if I for some areas this will be a blockbuster snowstorm. For sure. But what do we see? Maybe Colts Neck through Long Island, the Big Apple into the 95 corridor up to Boston.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost kind of the same story as the Mid Atlantic, right? You even have it here on the map. Is Long Island, you're probably going to mix, right? Cape Cod, you're going to mix. You're going to cut down on totals a little bit, but it's still a 6 to 10 type of event. I do want to call out the GFS here that you're showing, Garrett, is pretty aggressive, and the
Yeah, GFS
NWS
here.
forecast for snow is really aggressive for these areas too. So the Weather Service in New York has about 13 inches over the city.
Hmm.
There's kind of a 12 to 15 inch swath really through their whole coverage area, up into Connecticut, Rhode Island. Closer to the coast you are, it's more of a 6 to 10, but once you push inland a little bit, this is a big one for Boston. This is a huge one for most of southern and central New York. This is 12 to 18, probably more locally. So it's the same story as the Mid Atlantic and the Baltimore D.C. area. Once you get about 25 miles west of I-95, once you get up into a little bit of elevation, this is going to be a significant storm. You're going to get a big thump of snow there Sunday morning into the afternoon hours. Yeah, so Garrett pulled up the NWS snow forecast. I don't know, Garrett. What are your thoughts? I think we've
Yeah,
talked about the heavier amounts as you get north and west look pretty good, but man, that's really aggressive
it is aggressive
in
there.
cities and on the coast.
I think one thing that's interesting that will be, something to take note of as the storm rolls through. I think that these numbers from really Philly to New York City on southward from might be Mount Holly. Not calling anybody out or anything by any means. That section might be aggressive, but just note like we do start to see more of a west to east orientation of the precip shield and the snowfall map here. As you get farther into New England. So I do wonder if there's enough confluence, enough cold air that from New York City on northward, maybe we don't really change over too much along maybe just along the coast. But if you're in Providence, Hartford, into Foxborough and in Boston, um, it seems like there does tend to be sort of a rounding off of where there will be some mixing threat. And so from if you're in up the Upton office from New York City on northward, I actually feel pretty good about most of this forecast. And again, this is through 12Z Monday, so that's why these numbers are a little bit lower here in Boston because it's still snowing there. This section here, and maybe we can kind of zoom into to Philadelphia. Um, this section here is a little bit aggressive, I would say.
Yeah.
And so, maybe they're relying on some, just early front end thump where it snows 2-3 inches an hour, which it could with an easterly flow, and you end up getting a little bit more of a local max. But to think that hey, Tuckerton, New Jersey, and Colts Neck, New Jersey is going to get more than Philadelphia, I would be pretty surprised.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Garrett. I think everything you said. I think if you're in Hartford, Providence, Concord, Albany, that's a 12. It's a 12 to 18 inch storm.
Hmm.
Like it's. I feel pretty comfortable saying it's a 12 to 18 inch for all those areas. New York Metro. Man, I don't know, Garrett. If it was me, I would probably say 8 to 12.
Yeah.
But some of these higher totals are not out of the picture. Like you said, if you do get that front end thump when the ratios are higher, Philly and New York, I think 12-inch totals are on the table. The like we were seeing, the NWS forecast is definitely on the aggressive side of that, but it's not out of the picture for those areas. And then even Portland, Maine, it does kind of like you said start to level off, but Portland, Maine is an 8 to 12, maybe locally higher just to the south. So as much as we're talking about the potential of mixing and how maybe the NWS snow forecasts are a little aggressive, at the end of the day, this is a huge storm for much of the Northeast. So regardless of if you get 10 or 15 inches, this is going to be a significant snow.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, when you're in and this might actually be a pretty good representation. Looking at some of the cams, this is the RRFS. But if you're in New York City, like after you get your 10 inches of snow, like what difference does it make, right? Like
Yeah.
it's concrete, it's a city, right? I would think maybe like up towards Yonkers and Westchester County and those areas, like pretty locked in, 12 to 18. You're in the city,
Yep.
8 to 12. It might as well be 20 at that point.
Yeah.
And so, an interesting view here, though, and just wanted to kind of get your take is that, and this is what I'm talking about, and we're spending a lot of time in the Northeast, and we'll move off here in a second. There's just a lot of people who live here. We will see this kind of, like I said, confluence zone set up where you don't you start to stop gaining latitude, I guess, with the advance of the system, and you actually get some backing down of the rain snow line, or the rain or the snow sleet line, right in that corridor between Philadelphia and New York. And so, and this is the RFS is a very convectively active model. It tends to over amplify at times. I've seen it run warm. I was just very surprised to see, okay, yes, sleet tries to battle its way in there, and then it actually backs off. And so, you can see how close we're talking here, but just an interesting, these sort of convective allowing models will be interesting to monitor. Here we're taking a look at the NAM a little bit farther north with this sleet line, albeit at 60 hours. I couldn't trust the NAM as far as I can throw it. So, all that to
Yeah.
say, this is going to be the battle zone. If you live here, you know what that is, and you're going to start as heavy snow. You're going to get 8 to 10, then you'll switch over in some areas, and where you don't switch over, that's where you'll continue to add up into region or into the double digit category. Last thing I'd mention here, central Pennsylvania. This is what I would call a FOMO storm for me, as I live in Houston now. This is just as locked in as you can get for 12 to 18, in my opinion, for this area. Reminds me a lot of the December 2020 winter storm. We had a Thanksgiving 2017, 2018 winter storm where just big precip shield, no issue of sleet. You might get some sleet mixing in towards the end near Harrisburg, down through Hagerstown, Maryland, but for the most part, you're going to be pretty locked in from Pittsburgh to State College to Binghamton for 12 to 18. One thing I would note is, like, you're not seeing any like deformation bands and model deformation bands where you're getting a 24 to 30. It does seem like there's a cap, Christian, on what we can get with this storm. Seems to me
Yeah.
to be 20. I could see maybe locally in an area in Kentucky, West Virginia, seeing 20 plus, where there's more of that convection from the Gulf kind of flying up into the cold air, and you get maybe a couple hours of 3 to 4 inches an hour. But it
Yep.
seems to me there's a natural cap to what this storm can do.
Yeah, I mean, there is a cap with the QPF, even with the higher snow ratios. I agree with you, Garrett, that for most areas, 20 is probably your upper bound in areas that stay all snow. The other area, we mentioned Cape Cod, which is always a fascinating place to forecast snow over really into the Boston metro. The one thing that you were showing, Garrett, where it flattens out, is you are a little closer to the low, and you are a little closer to that
Easterly.
first piece of mid-level energy. So and you see the GFS resolving it. I would not. There are mixing concerns, particularly on Cape Cod for a little while, but if I had to pin one area in the Northeast that could maybe bump over 20 if everything came together, it would be that spot right there. It
It's
would
a great
be
catch.
uh,
Yeah.
right on Cape Cod, but in the Boston metro area. There's a lot of dynamics here as the storm kind of departs and moves off to the
Mhm.
east that could squeeze out a little extra.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, this is a pretty locked in setup up there for an eight. This is going to be where you start seeing 18 to 24 pop up on the NWS maps, I think.
Yeah.
And you're going to get that you're going to get the enhancement off the ocean with the easterly flow. Um, like you said, kind of enhancing in dynamics where everything else is kind of set in stone synoptically. Some of the areas that you would see, you kind of need to have that extra oomph, if you will. And Boston is definitely one of those areas. So it's a good pickup. And again, just kind of shows sort of the shift in the last 4 days where Boston really was, are we going to get kind of shunted to the south? And now they might win out in this, which sometimes
Yeah.
tends to happen. Just wanted to, last few minutes here, touch on what we're going to see Directly behind this storm from a temperature standpoint. We move through the day on Monday, and anywhere in purple, you're seeing temperatures below 5 degrees. Anywhere in white, you're seeing below zero. This is spreading fairly, pretty far to the south. In fact, I'm going to move this to the eastern section here, just so we can actually see some numbers on here. But you're looking at teens into Houston. You're single digits into Dallas. You'll get single digits. Let's move a little bit farther west here, real quick. Single digits into Austin, San Antonio. These areas move through the day on Monday and into Tuesday. Tuesday morning. I mean, look at these temperatures in Mississippi and Tennessee, Christian. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
remarkable. Well below zero, all through the state of Tennessee, Kentucky. Pretty impressive when it comes to the magnitude, but obviously impactful for what we're going to see directly coming after this storm.
Yeah, hugely disruptive to snow removal, to recovery. Obviously, with power outages, it's a huge risk to human safety. That's why if you have if you have a backup generator, it's great to make sure that that's ready to go. Because I mean, Garrett, you see there, and I think the GFS is maybe trying to resolve some snowpack there. I mean,
Hmm.
I see some minus tens there through central Tennessee and parts of Kentucky. Um, that's really really deep cold, and you don't get a lot of relief during the day either,
No.
which you're kind of feeling here. I mean, you've got highs in the 20s across most of the week, and this is we want to point out this is all week. You really, I mean, you get a
Right.
little bit of relief in central and northern Georgia and central and northern Alabama, but not much. I mean, you're below freezing the better part of the week, pretty much for the whole area that's getting impacted by this storm. Obviously, much colder in the Ohio Valley and on the East Coast. So
But look at this,
it is going to
Christian. I
be
mean,
cold.
look at we're now on to Thursday and to
Yeah.
Friday, and it kind of resupplies, if you will. I mean,
Yep.
this is Friday morning, and we're talking temperatures still below zero in areas that just in Minnesota, sure, but in Kentucky and Tennessee, maybe a night. But the idea of 4 nights in the next 7 days being potentially at or below zero, um, this is what had severe impacts last year at this time. The longevity of the cold versus the instantaneous one night of it is what is concerning. Look at next weekend. This is Saturday. I mean, we're this is 8 days away, and we're talking still continued potential of single digit lows. Uh, High order of magnitude here, I feel like, from the cold.
Yeah, and one more thing I'll point out coming from an aviation background is look, if you have certainly if you have flight plans this weekend, anywhere in the from Texas to the Southeast, Ohio Valley, East Coast, um, obviously snow and freezing rain are going to affect that. You're going to see a lot of delays and cancellations. But one of the most impactful things in aviation is when you get snow and ice followed by deep cold. It is very hard to de-ice. Sometimes the equipment fails. Aircraft have certain minimum temperatures where you basically have to keep the heat running overnight. Without getting into all the details, there's a lot of operational constraints, and so even into next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, across the whole Southeast, Ohio Valley, over into Texas and Oklahoma, I would count on if you have flights that you're going to see some delays and cancellations for regardless of the airline, because cold temperatures after winter precipitation are hugely difficult to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, we're still talking. I mean, anytime you're seeing this is these are the type of anomalies that we were seeing February 21 through Texas, last winter when we had the winter storm across the Gulf Coast. This was the type of look that you got from a temperature perspective. And so anytime I look for sort of outrageous winter weather events that are going to occur, one of them being this week, and then potentially the following week, is the cold air available and in place? This seems to be the case, and this is just one model run. But even if you go to, if you go to the ensemble look, I mean, this is fairly significant for an ensemble 7 to 10 days out. I mean, this is actually more of an impressive cold look farther south. than this one, than the modeled view had been 7 days out from this cold shot coming. So all that to say, and we talked a little bit about it yesterday, Christian. We're not going to go hammer home on this deep because we have a winter storm to deal with right now. But you get these cold shots and then you get another one following up. The first one kind of lays the groundwork and kind of sets the baroclinic zone, the Arctic boundary, a little bit farther south. There is the potential that we could be, on here with this stream, hopefully with Dave running the media part of it this time next week, given what we're looking at in the overall pattern, and it could potentially be a little bit farther south this time.
Yeah, yeah, you always have to worry about, like you said, Garrett, the cold air kind of resets things and shoves the boundary further south. And that's, if you can get the energy to come across from the Pacific, you got the moisture in place, you can always have a follow-up storm. So long way out, a lot of uncertainty, obviously with that, but there is a little bit of a signal for the southeast again about this time next week. So it'll be something worth keeping an eye on once we can kind of clear this storm out and start sampling that one.
Yeah, so stay with Flash Weather AI throughout the entire storm system. Like I said, we're gonna have live wall-to-wall coverage. Dave will be back tomorrow, actually tonight into Raleigh, and he will be able to really take us through the entire process. The storm breaking out from the west, tracking across the southeast. We'll have DOT images. We'll have live coverage. Maybe some boots on the ground coverage, who knows, but we will be locked into this. And then, following into next week, if anything does start to pop up, if there's continued coverage needed, we're your source for that. Christian, any final kind of parting messages before we sign off here and hand over to Dave starting tonight and into tomorrow?
Yeah, for this one, just today's Friday. This is kind of the last day to prepare for everybody before this thing gets going. So, based on what we talked about in this call, generators, groceries, warm clothes, anything you need to do for your family to get ready for this event. This is definitely the day to do it before things get going. And I guess for school next week, there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to be very happy because I expect to see a lot of school delays and cancellations really throughout next week, but definitely for the first half. So for a lot of people, Garrett, we talked about yesterday, under the age of 15, this is probably going to be the biggest snow that they've ever seen. So we talked about all the dangers with this and obviously a concerning storm. But for those who do see a lot of snow, I hope if you like snow that you enjoy it. And please stay tuned to Flash. We'll be keeping you updated with Dave Downey throughout the event this weekend. And obviously, stay safe, particularly for those expecting snow and ice who aren't used to this. This is going to be a big hit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Christian. Download the Flash Weather AI app. You can go to the App Store and download that. Check out our Weather Command Center, Flash Weather AI. Have everything you would need to be able to track this storm if you want to do it yourself. Christian, have a great rest of your day. Stay warm, and we'll talk soon.